Thanks for choosing this free Anfield Index podcast. If you'd prefer to listen to this or any of our other shows without adverts, then now's the time to check out Anfield Index Pro. With AI Pro, you can supercharge your entire listening experience. You'll not only get all of our podcasts without the ads, but you'll have them far faster with our quick publish feature available exclusively for subscribers. AI Pro also puts you in the heart of our sound studio, with an option to listen to many of our shows live and interact with the podcasters in real time as the shows are recording. Upgrading couldn't be easier. AI Pro is available on all popular podcast platforms, and we have our own apps for Apple and Android. Just head on over to AnfieldIndexPro.com and get started today.
Hello and welcome to the Money Talks podcast. We are going to be covering Liverpool's recruitment policy in the FSG era. And the point of the podcast really is to look back over time and just see if there's been any, Darwinism or evolving going on. And if not, we can call it out. But I'm sure there'll be plenty of interesting tidbits on this show and analysis. And obviously the man whose show it is, I'm hosting Mo. Welcome to your own show.
Thank you, Gags. Yeah, nice to have the show on the other foot and be a guest on hosting duties. So yeah, really looking forward to this one. It's something that we've done in the past and produced some really good analysis and some interesting conclusions from that analysis for our subscribers and listeners in years gone by. So yeah, I think we'll be sharing some one or two interesting insights during this.
Brilliant. We also have the numbers man. It's Mr. Dan Kennett. I was going to call him Darth Kennett. Then it was a bit sad, but Darth, welcome to the show.
Hiya, Gags.
Yeah, this is going to be interesting because we do want to see if there's any trends you picked up on or anything you've seen in the numbers that's changed. That would be really good. So let's dive right into this. Shall we start right at the beginning? Of the FSG era, which was really the Commolli. I've put a process tab on the end of this spreadsheet, as in what process were we following, and this was the Commolli process. Should we call it the Commolli word?
Well, I think it's got to be the Moneyball process because that's all it was.
Yes.
When we think back to 10 years ago, it was Moneyball, this, that, and the other, wasn't it? And I guess it was what was clear straight away. Was that they had some ideas in mind from American sports primarily, which they wanted to bring into soccer, such as a separate head of recruitment, sporting director, technical director, general manager, as they're called in baseball, as they're used to working with over there, and also sort of like maybe more of a coach manager structure, and also the analytics. And the analytics side just became known as Moneyball because that's what was the zeitgeist at the time, Gags, because there was a movie at the time starring Brad Pitt just about this time, and it was everywhere. And the Red Sox had just won the World Series for the third time, I think, as well. And
I really enjoyed the movie as well, to be honest. Moneyball.
It was good crack, wasn't it? Really?
Yeah. It was really good, really good. So if you do want to, not spend time reading like me and be lazy and just watch the film, just do that. It's fine.
Because John Henry gets himself played by somebody at the end of the film. He's actually in that film at the end, just for the last 15 minutes, isn't he?
Yeah, it's really good. It's really good. But yeah, so the Commolli era, Mo, I'm not sure if you split it up this way in the finances, but this was essentially 2010 and 11, the seasons 10-11 and 11-12, basically in terms of us spending in the transfer market. So, What was for the? Oh, you have split it up. Okay, so what was it like then in those years in terms of what was the club earning, what were the wages like, and the turnover and all that? Let's do that first.
Yeah, so I've carried out analysis for the full season of 2010-11 onwards through till the last set of published accounts which relate to 2020-21. So 10-11 is, all of our listeners will be aware, was the season when we had that change of ownership. For the first several months of that season, we saw the dying days of Hicks and Gillette before they were ousted, and obviously were replaced by what then were known as New England Sports Ventures, I think, NESV. So that's the name that they went by at that point. And the analysis for 10-11 was interesting in that our turnover for that season was 184 million, which seems paltry now compared to the numbers that we talk about these days. But the wages bill in total, so this is for all staff, not just for players, by the way, was 135 million. So wages to turnover as a ratio was 73%. Now, for those that listen regularly to Money Talks, I have said that the sweet spot for clubs is probably just under 60% and ideally even below 50%. But certainly Liverpool Football Club has generally aimed to get between 55 and 60% most seasons under FSG, but they began with a high figure of 73%. Now, what I've then done is looked at the club's payments as well as receipts from transfer activity. Now, I mean, there are various sources for some of this information around transfer fee spend, and you hear the term net spend used quite often. But what I've done is go to the official set of accounts, looked into the cash flow statement to obtain these figures. And what it shows is that for that season, payments towards transfers amounted to 89 million, and the proceeds we had from sales amounted to 49 million. So there's a difference there of 40 million, and the bulk of that 49 would have related to the sale of Torres, who, as we know, went in January 2011, and his departure followed shortly thereafter with the incomings of Luis Suarez and Andy Carroll. But when you factor in the £40 million net payments towards transfer activity, as well as the wages of 135, and you relate that to turnover, the total ratio is 95%, which means that for every £1 that the club earns, 95 pence of that went towards either wages or towards transfer fees. And that then meant very, very little left to cover an assortment of other costs, agents' fees, the upkeep of Anfield, the upkeep of Kirby, and obviously in those days we had Millwood, and all the other kind of costs that are associated with running a football club.
Don't forget all those Dallas Architect plans, Mo.
Oh yeah, of course. Which oh my word! Only cost £69 million in impairment fees a couple of years later. But so the point being, in 2010-11, FSG inherited somewhat of a mess, and they had to tighten the ship. Otherwise, based on the trajectory, we were in very shaky Everton-esque ground, and we had to move away from that and achieve a more financially stable footing very, very quickly in order to even consider be able to compete, never mind to compete with our rivals. Whereas the following season in 11-12, there was a little bit more by way of stability. So that season's accounts related to a 10-month period. So up until 10-11, our annual accounts went up to the end of July. But then from 11-12 onwards, we moved our accounts in line with most other football clubs in England, where the accounts go up to the 31st of May. Because normally, nearly every year, the season is over by the end of May. And that 10-month period saw turnover at 169, wages at 119, which saw a ratio of wages to turnover of 70%, slightly better than the previous year. However, in terms of transfer fee payments and proceeds, the net difference was only 14 million, which meant if you add that to the wages and relate that to turnover, the overall ratio was 79%, which was a big improvement already on the 95% from the previous year. So within its first full year, FSG were already starting to make a mark by reining in spend on transfers, as well as ensuring that the wage bill was reasonable relative to turnover.
Darth, there's some really interesting points from Mo there, and I think they point to a lot of what happens then in 11-12. I'm shocked at 11-12 was 45 million, in terms of fees, and then proceeds of 31. But let's talk about what we did in terms of in terms of players bought over those 2 years in that Commolli, in that Moneyball era, shall we?
Yeah, I guess the first thing is that I always had a mantra for this when FSG took over, that for our state of our club, I said we've got a Champions League wage bill with a Europa League squad. We had so many terrible contracts. We had massively overpaid for mediocre players. I mean, the pinnacle of it was the Hodgson summer and Christian Perslow. We signed Joe Cole, made Joe Cole the club's highest paid player, plus players like Paul Konchesky and Milan Jovanovic on a free transfer on extremely high wages. And there were so many of these types of deals. It was quite staggering that the amount of the lack of value, should we say, Gags, that we were getting from that wage bill when they took over.
Completely agree. It's I mean, who were the type of players that they got rid of that summer in 10-11? That's what we want to try and quickly look at. It was Torres. Babel. Looks like he went, I think.
Konchesky and Jovanovic only lasted a year.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of and so did Poulsen. It was almost like, let's just get them out at any cost, right? And just to get them off the wage bill, so the club can stabilise.
Yeah, there was a whole load of players. I mean, in a short space of time for Sekeni, there was 23 players, in and out.
Absolutely. I mean, and this is just on Mo's fantastic last pod he did with Stefan Szyminski. One of the things why Szyminski's stuff he did looked at with wage spend versus success, why it's so enduring, is because it's a proxy for talent. There's an assumption that talent is paid in accordance with its ability, and therefore when you rank squads in terms of their wages, that should be an approximation for the level of talent in that squad. But then you do get exceptions from time to time, and Liverpool 10-11 would definitely be one of those. A bit like Man United now, Gags, and Everton now. Yeah. So Gags, Mo already said that we're a bit Everton-esque when they took. I know that was a really nicely way to put it. But you know what I mean, is because you're paying the wages, but you haven't got the requisite amount of talent for the wages that you're paying.
No. I mean, Stevie was on stupid money, crazy money, wasn't he, as well, at this point? And I think over 11-12, maybe actually it's later. Which was the year where, was it the first Brendan year where Suarez was going to go to that the 40 million and one thing happened in 2012, was it? That's where Suarez and Gerrard's wages got pumped up because and
Pepe Reina had a renewal and Perslow as well.
Really interesting because you'll see it actually. You'll see it come up in a bit when Mo goes through the Brendan era, the pump from this year to next. But anything else on the players? I mean, there were some interesting things in terms of average.
I guess the ultimate one is Andy Carroll, because they've only been in the club 3 months. There's been no time for anybody to bed in, nothing like what we do today, and effectively you were relying on a gut instinct call from Commolli and or Kenny on that player. And it turned out to be a terrible call for every, in terms of the value of what we paid for Carroll. You could say we got a really good sale fee for Torres, which we did, but look at it with hindsight, the Carroll deal, it just didn't come off. And the question is, look, maybe the biggest comparison would be Todd Bowley at Chelsea now. There's rumours of him potentially signing Ronaldo, wasn't there, last week? Because that's the kind of thing that maybe a new owner does, and he makes a complete horlicks of it, trying to make a statement almost.
Absolutely. And I think when we look back at some of these players, I remember us talking about it back in the day, because we were actually on AI at this point. AI had kicked off. early 2011, and so that summer was the first summer we'd covered in terms of players bought and stats being available to the public, because that's when AI started, and we literally February the 6th, 2011. So just as Kenny had come in and we beat Chelsea on the day, it was when Torres' first game for Chelsea was against Liverpool at Stamford Bridge, and we beat them 1-0, and that was AI's first day of covering stats on Twitter. And I remember that summer we talked about Henderson and Downing, and remember we tried to look at what Commolli was doing by looking at Opta stats.
Yeah.
And those two were the best, the most creative in 10-11 for Villa and
Charlie Adam as well.
Oh yeah, Charlie Adam too. So for Villa and Sunderland and Blackpool, was it?
Yeah.
They tried to do something, didn't they? They tried, but it wasn't the right way.
No, and I think and the fact that Commolli was sacked in April 2012 tells you that nobody was happy behind the scenes about what had happened. And I think there's two things I would make. First of all, is that it's really come clear in some of Commolli's follow-on jobs that he isn't particularly good at using analytics in his job, much as maybe he wanted to trumpet himself this way as the Billy Bean, and when he hired him. But with hindsight, his record isn't particularly good. His strengths were always as a scout, particularly of young players. I mean, that's how he made his break for Arsene Wenger in the mid-noughties, wasn't it? Signing some real gems from Ligue 1.
Credit for Suarez. That's one thing.
Yeah, he does for sure. But in terms of the analytics, maybe you could say that Torres was a scouting signing rather than a data signing. And the other thing that was Gags, is that the data wasn't rich enough back then. We know now we know what we now know. Now we know that we weren't collecting the right things. B, it wasn't being possible to look at what some of the things that we needed to look at. And so it was, like you said, they tried to make some decisions based on the data that they did have. And I'd say the only one that possibly had any merit was Craig Bellamy, other than Suarez. I mean,
unbelievable failures apart from two. That's mad.
Yeah, I mean, Henderson's been a long-term success, but remember that in his first summer that Brendan wanted to sell him.
Yeah.
So, but he became a long-term success, obviously, but not in those early years.
Yeah, £16 million, 16.2 million for Hendo. Mo, any thoughts on the Commolli era in terms of players incoming and outgoing for yourself before I just do a couple of little tidbits?
Yeah, I think that one of the things that was clear was that the manager still had a considerable say over recruitment, and I think that's a subject that's been long discussed. Is how successful a club can be recruitment-wise if the manager has a very significant say. And I think that's where perhaps Commolli did slightly fall victim, is that, there were, different voices, different opinions about the right approach to recruitment. And maybe Commolli's vision didn't quite win through, in certain key positions. And that's why we perhaps ended up with the kind of window that we had back in summer 2011, I think it was. And obviously that continued during the Brendan era, which we'll come on to. But, it's when we saw a shift, where that sporting director really, made the role his own, and, his influence grew, that our recruitment and the hit rate improved with it. So, it shows that there was that evolution from those early days, by some of the evidence that we saw.
I agree with that, Mo. I agree. 100% agree with that, because you're not going to get Commolli is not going to challenge a club legend, is he?
But Darth, at the time when we did look at it, we did look at, whilst Kenny did have what he wanted to do in terms of strategy and cross it in, and so maybe the strategy came from Kenny in terms of I want people to create, I want to be able to do cross, I want to be able to, and we bought Carroll, so we need someone to put the ball in for him to score, right? Yeah. So what did we go and do? We used the analytics to go get the best people that cross the most, Hendo, Downing, the people that create the most, Hendo, Downing, Adam. Yeah. At the time, it was sound strategy. It didn't work. is the different. What I'm trying to get at is here.
Yeah. Okay.
They
I'll give you
did
that.
try
Yeah.
to use some sort of a method to the madness, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
There was
Yeah,
some
I guess. Sorry, guys. I guess the kind of criticism that was levelled even at that time was maybe, though that strategy was sound, it's perhaps whether it was tinged by British philosophy. Now, if there may have been truth to that, there may not have been truth to that. But if there was truth to that, we may have missed out, for example, on an Eden Hazard and ended up getting a Stuart Downing. So who knows where.
That was a criticism at the time, wasn't it? The fans, a lot of the fans called it the Buy British policy.
Yeah.
Let's talk about that, because we had Andy Carroll already in, but that summer we went 1, 2, 3, 4 British players.
Yeah,
and three foreigners with Jose Enrique, Cortez, and Donny.
And Quatters, you had a reserve goalie and a youth prospect centre back, so it doesn't really count, does it? Only Enrique, and he was already playing in the Premier League.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. But I think the fact that Commolli was sacked in April 2012 tells you everything you need to know.
Yeah, there was a net spend of I think 38.62 million in this era, and the average age was 25 years old, so we hadn't quite hit that sweet spot yet either. Still not bad. And I think the average net spend on a player was 1.68 million, guys. So over, yeah, that's pretty mad, right? So I think Kenny bought in. What's the count here? 8 players. So with the outgoings and the money, and mostly Torres really took the money out, but 1.68 million per player. That's pretty mental. That's something to note, okay, folks, if you're listening. 1.68 million is the average net spend per player for that era. Okay, so that's the Commolli Moneyball era. So how do we want to split this next then, guys? Would it be easier just to do Brendan Rodgers era and then Jurgen Klopp and up to the end of the season, with Edwards? Because obviously, I think it might be easier to do managers rather than.
I just want to throw a name in, right, for you, which you might have forgotten all about, Gags. Jen Chang.
Oh shit!
Jen Chang. No, hang on.
Did you get me when I said, "Oh shit"?
Yeah. Jen Chang hired May 2012, and he was sacked in November 2012. So only six glorious months. But he was involved in that first summer of Brendan, and there were rumours that he was the one who was behind the signing of Osama Saidi from Holland. Anyway, I don't know if that's ever been proved, but that was a rumour. But right. So there was no director of football in place at this point. Michael Edwards had come with Commolli. Nobody had been appointed in its stead, and the committee hadn't yet been formalised. So there was a complete vacuum in summer 2012. Do you remember Brendan's first press conference?
Oh dear, I don't. I tried to forget it, to be honest.
Just the tension straight away with Ian Ayre when he did a joint press conference with Ian Ayre. And Ayre was waffling on around a sort of kind of a collegiate approach and a considered approach. So obviously at FSG they decided we're not going to be reliant on one man's say-so to spend 35 million anymore. We're going to have this, we're going to checks and balances and stuff like that.
Committee.
Yeah. But the committee wasn't in place until about November that year, so after the summer window. And the upshot was we signed loads of players that the manager knew from his previous clubs.
Exactly, but before we get to that, let's just get Mo to give us his Brendan era overall numbers, and then we can really dig deep, Darth, into those. Yeah,
for the numbers, we should definitely keep it the whole era for sure.
Yeah, go for it. Okay. Go for it, Mo.
Right, so summer 2012, Brendan joins us, and at that point, we do see our turnover at top the 200 million mark. So we, for 2012-13, generate turnover of 206 million. As far as I can recall, we didn't have any European football that season, so it was purely domestic competitions that generated our turnover in terms of broadcast revenue. Commercially, we were starting to see a little bit of growth with the new deal we had with Warrior. And on top of that, matchday income was relatively healthy by Premier League standards. So 206 million is where we came in at that season. Wages, though, hadn't seen an appreciable increase. They were around 132 million. So what it meant is that the wages to turnover ratio for that season was 64%, which is slightly on the high side, but not obscenely high by any means. Our income and expenditure when it came to transfer fee payments, which has again, as I mentioned earlier, come from the club's official accounts from its cash flow statement. And this, it's important to state, is different to amortization. Amortization is a term that's often bandied about when it comes to the subject of transfers, but it's actually to do with the accounting treatment for a transfer. So, for example, when we sell a player, we recognise the net income in full. So when Felipe Coutinho was sold to Barcelona, his net book value was negligible, and yet we sold him for clearly over £100 million. So the accounts for that season when he was sold reflected a net profit for the club of, I think it was 106 million. But that was really kind of skewing the actual position. So what I am referring to here when I talk about transfer fee payments and proceeds is the actual cash movements, which is a far more realistic representation of money going out from the club and money coming into the club when it comes to the matter of transfers. So for that first season under Brendan, we had 60 million going out, which, by the way, would have included some of the transfers from the previous window from summer 2011, because as we've talked about regularly, transfer fee payments are often staged over 2, 3, 4 different payments. And on top of that, clearly, we had some incomings with the likes of Joe Allen and Barini in that summer 2012 window. Proceeds from sales was a relatively small amount of only 16 million, which meant that the net amount of payments was 44 million, which represented 21% of the turnover for that season, which meant that the overall ratio I talked about earlier, which is net transfer fee payments and wages relative to turnover, increased to 85%, which was pretty high. The following season...
So Mo, before you go on to next season, that year there was European football. We were in the Europa League. It was the next year that we weren't. So we got knocked out by St. Zenisberg. St. Peter's?
Zenit, yeah.
Zenit St. Petersburg. That's the one where Suarez had that free kick, amazing free kick, wasn't it? And we went out, I think, 3-1 on away goals. We went out on away goals, lost 2-0 away, 3-1 at home.
Right.
But also, I think that raise is because we tried to keep Suarez that year, right? I think, or was it the next year?
That was the following season.
Oh,
yeah, that was 13-14.
Okay.
Yeah, that's it. So 13-14 was the start of a new 3-year Premier League deal for broadcast rights, which resulted in turnover increasing by approximately 25%, despite the lack of any European football, as you rightly point out. So 256 million in turnover. Wages were 144 million. So the wages to turnover ratio was 56%, which was far healthier. On the transfer fee front, we saw payments of 67 million versus proceeds of 13. So net transfer fee payments amounted to 54 million, which was 21% of turnover. So the gross ratio of transfer fee payments and wages relative to turnover was 77%, which was an 8% improvement on 12-13. 13-14, I believe, was the season when we really started to phase in incentivized contracts. And though incentives by way of bonus payments had existed for many years prior to FSG coming along, what FSG looked to really put an emphasis on was heavily incentivized contracts where the base wage may be relatively low compared to other clubs such as a Manchester United or a Chelsea or a Manchester City, but the bonus payments that were on offer were very attractive. And the logic behind it, which I think partly came from baseball, was that, you know, the more success you have on the field, the more a player is rewarded. And obviously we had a discussion, the good Professor Simon, Stefan and I, about this subject, which where his view was, you know, it perhaps doesn't work quite in the way that FSG feel, but nonetheless, FSG did phase this in that season, and it was only going to be another 2-3 years after that we were going to really see the full effects of that. But 13-14, we started to see somewhat of a turnaround. And then 14-15, which was the final season under Brendan, turnover came just shy of 300 million. Wages were 166 million. So there was about a 15% increase in the wages bill. But the wages turnover ratio still remained healthy at 56%. Transfer fee payments amounted to 96 million. Summer 2014, as you all remember, was a season when we lost Suarez, but brought in various players to replace him, such as Adam Lallana, Dejan Lovren, and all of other Dave Hendricks' favourites players. So with that incoming set of players, we splashed out 96 million that season. Proceeds were 37 million, which then had a net transfer fee payments figure of 59 million. So when you look at wages and net transfer fee payments combined relative to turnover, it was coming in at 76%. So it was starting to now become a little bit more stable in terms of our overall finances, which was a good thing, because obviously it was that season that we then commenced work on the main stand expansion, which was a very, very significant project, and we needed to ensure that the finances were in a healthy state in order to ensure that the expansion and that £110 million investment would not have a detrimental effect on player wages and funds available for transfers. So that was a general trend. It was really about bedding in this financial model and starting to phase in incentivized contracts and seeing what the benefits of that would be. But it was only after a change in manager that we would really see the fruits of that.
Thank you so much, Mo, for that. That's amazing. As you can see, Darth, this is now where we're in the committee phase, but the finances are coming into, thanks also to the Premier League contracts, for sure. That gave us that bump up one of the years. Really helped FSG. Really, the timing of that was a little bit of luck involved as well, we have to say, don't we? That allows them to get this ship to where they want it to be, looking at what Mo's been telling us in terms of the numbers, and raise some of those fees up in terms of what they're spending on, especially after 2011-12, where it was net transfer fee payments of 14 million. The next three were 44, 54, 59. Much healthier, right?
Yeah,
much healthier. So yeah, thanks a little bit to the Premier League, but let's shift our focus then on this Brendan era and the players coming in. And you started it off really nicely early, and I had to cut you off at that first window, which, looking at it, is horrific.
Yeah.
Joe Allen, Sahin, Saidi, and Yessel.
Well, Sahin alone, to be fair.
Yeah, but we paid 4.2 million for the loan, dude.
Was it? Yeah. Again, that was another one that was rumoured from Jen Chang.
Yeah.
Sahin and Saidi and Yessel were Jen Chang as well. But yeah, Barini and Joe Allen was very much Brendan. Swansea boys, tiny, great technicians, Gags.
Yes, but not very talented.
No.
To try and get yourself into the Champions League. Now, can you tell me when Michael Edwards joined the club?
He joined when Damien Commolli did.
Oh,
but
right, okay.
he joined. They came as a pair from Tottenham, and he'd been at Portsmouth as well with him. He'd been at Portsmouth under Harry Redknapp. But yeah, he came at the same time, and but he was only very much in the analyst team. He was just a regular analyst at that point, I believe.
When
in
did
that
he
department,
become senior technical analyst?
maybe it's somewhere around this time, because the committee was launched in November, and it was the head of scouting. I can't remember his name now. There was two guys we got from Man City, and Michael Edwards, plus then Ian Eyre for the negotiation side, and Brendan.
The only reason I ask is because this was the point where we did one of the best January transfer windows ever.
Well, quite, yes.
In terms of Sturridge and Coutinho.
Yep.
And that obviously does point at a little bit of a change there from your summer to your winter window.
Do you know? But do you know why? Do you know why we did that brilliant window? Do you know? And we needed it desperately, because do you know where we were on the 1st of January in the league?
Where were we?
We had 28 points from 20 games.
That's horrific. I didn't know.
And we were 10th.
We were 10th. It was that bad.
Yeah. It was 28 points from 20 games, and then we sign Sturridge and Coutinho, and I think we end up going at 2 points a game for the rest of the season. And we end up getting 61 that year, 61 points. But yeah, pretty much 2 points a game from that perspective.
So again, I mean, the ages they're really good ages though. You could see a shift now in terms of what type of player or what type of age. This is where now it's really kicking in terms of the committee and the process, in terms of, right, we're not buying players that are older than 24, 25. We're spending money on them. Alan 22, Sahin 23, I see Saidi 24, Yesel 18, Sturridge 23, Coutinho 20, Barini 21. That's and a move away from all British as well. There's a nice mix there in terms of a couple of Brits in there, but players from everywhere really.
And I think to be fair, right, we're not going to have many kind words to say about Ian Eyre, but I think he was in the after Commolli went, he was in the position of the chief negotiator role for pretty much the best part of 4 years. But this was probably his finest hour, was going to Inter and basically coming back with Felipe Coutinho, because he offered them an upfront payment. He offered all the cash upfront, or changed the instalments package, and we got Coutinho. So.
Amazing,
and buying Coutinho, that is the ultimate FSG Moneyball signing. If you could say, show me, Siri, show me a Moneyball signing, it would pretty much be Coutinho.
Yeah, that's our best, isn't it, in terms of what we did. So then we move on, 13-14, a freebie in terms of Toure, Sissoko, Victor Moses was a loan. Was that a loan?
Yeah.
Was a loan. Thiago Lori, Luis Alberto, Simon Mignolet, Iago Aspas, and Mamadou Sakho. That is a lot of players, actually.
So
but again, quality.
Yeah, and I think this is the equivalent of Commolli summer 2011, where the committee are given nearly all the authority to make analytics-based signings, data-driven signings.
Yeah.
And have you got the Serbian lad on there as well? Or was he he was the summer after. Like Markovic was the summer after. Yeah,
he was. That's mate. You don't want to. 2014-15.
No. Yeah.
Is depression zone, to be honest.
And I think the key thing here is that the process is better, but though it needed to be refined, because there's absolutely no question that Luis Alberto and Iago Aspas have gone on to be top players, but on the continent. Luis Alberto is still one of the best midfielders in Serie A. He's still, he's a massive data player for Lazio still, and Aspas has been, outside of one or two players, he's pretty much been the highest scorer in Spain for the best part of 6 or 7 years. In terms of total goals in La Liga. So these were the right players, But due to all the issues with the politicking, Brendan not playing the committee players, as we all know, and it wasn't an integrated process. So you could sign these players, but if the manager doesn't use them, doesn't rate them, then it's waste.
Yeah, 100%. That's the issue. They're completely wasted. There was no method. There was no method, and there was no buy-in. I think that's the key. Where you compare to Klopp now, there's complete buy-in, but there was no buy-in from the manager at all in that process. And he's vindictive in a way. If he doesn't get his way, he kind of goes out of his way.
For sure. And the other thing about that summer was there was some of the players that we were linked with who were targeted by the committee. Right, there was two that I stand out. First of all was Henrik Mkhitaryan, which was June 2013. We tried really hard to get him while he was still in for Shakhtar Donetsk, I think it was. And then also Diego Costa. We offered 20 million for him wherever he was. It might have been Atletico Madrid, August 2013, and then I think he went to Chelsea a year later. But the problem is that when you're like 10th in the Premier League, or you've just finished. Where did we finish in first? Brendan's for 6th or 7th, was it? When you've got a manager like Brendan, who's a rookie making his way in the game, you haven't got the clout to sign these kind of players, Mkhitaryan and Diego Costa. So you can target your recruitment can identify the right talent, but negotiating that deal and attracting the player to come to you are just as hard.
Completely agree, and that's a big problem. Again, this year, the age only Kolo Touré, but on a free transfer, Liverpool have shown they don't mind an aging player coming in. Apart from that, it was all 25 and below for all the players. So again, sticking to that, sticking to that process really. Right, 2014-15. This is hellacious, dude. This is hellacious. I mean, we're losing Suarez, and in come Kevin Stewart, Javier Manquillo, Ricky Lambert, Emre Can, Divock Origi, Alberto Moreno, Mario Balotelli, Lazar Markovic, Dejan Lovren, and Adam Lallana.
Yeah.
I mean, if you're going to spend £136 million, that's how you do not spend it.
Well, this was the Suarez money. Trying to get Alexis Sanchez, not getting Alexis Sanchez for similar C Mkhitaryan, C Costa. And then ending up with apparently the one time that one of the few times FSG have deviated from their process. It came out that Mike Gordon, basically after Brendan got second and 86 points in 13-14, they decided to give him the key to the kingdom so he could bypass the transfer committee, and then he could get his players in. And Brendan's eye for a player, as we know, as we've seen with Leicester, Leicester's recruitment was very good. Gradually over the Brendan era, it's got progressively worse. So that's how you end up with the three Southampton lads, basically.
Jesus, it was horrendous, and really that deserved. I mean, it wasn't even his last bloody window. Can you believe it? I mean, the guy still got one more window. And in that window, obviously, he was really this was, you could tell this was the end. You could tell this was the end. There was no, obviously 2014-15 was bad. You get spanked on the last day by Stoke as well. Then there were changes coming, and obviously his coaches got sacked, Brendan's. At this point, if there was anything good going, there was nothing good in that. You said that window, because he did so well, 13-14, he got the keys to the kingdom, right? And that was the problem. And now the keys are taken off, or he's given half, should I say, of the keys, so he gets to choose some players and not. And we ended up getting. We were in full parallel recruitment by that phase. And committee recruitment and Rodgers recruitment. There were some decent players here, but Benteke's got to be one of the biggest failures, more than Carroll even, 41.85 million. You know,
I think the only thing with Benteke is, didn't we get the exact same feedback from him a year later?
We recouped it, I suppose. That was the thing. Yeah, we recouped it. We didn't for Carroll, but we had one of the best signings ever in Firmino, 36.9 million. 23 years old at the time. Can you believe it? Turned 30 now. Unbelievable.
Yeah, I think the other one I just want to mention quickly is that we talk about the age of players. Mo was talking about the age of players as well. Is that I think this has been a slightly refined process as well, because there are parallels here with baseball as well. Is that the age of players when they're too young now, rather than especially with Markovic and Alberto, we got them basically with low levels of minutes from what you would call second tier leagues. I think we got Alberto from Barcelona B, and now we do look for more track record, if you like. If we're going to sign a young player, there has to be some kind of more robust, maybe in the league, the quality of the league they're in, or where they're playing, and things like that. And maybe we're not quite signing the 20-year-olds like back then, who were very raw. So it's almost like reducing the level of risk, I think, Gags, by refining stuff over time.
Completely agree. So, right. Overall, then, in this window, in this Brendan, should we say?
Laughing at what Sean's posted in the chat.
Yeah, I mean,
famous.
We went mad at that. We lost
the famous hatchet job. The world.
We went absolutely crazy. But the average net spend of a player, this was the most expensive, was £2.19 million per player in the Brendan era. It was the most, we spent. I think he spent a net spend of 353 million over his time at the club. I think Klopp's. Well, we'll get to Klopp in a bit. Actually, I won't make any comments. We can talk about that in a bit when we compare them. But 153 million over time, and the average age was pretty decent, actually, 23.06 for Brendan Rodgers of players coming in. So you can see now the drop from 25 to 23 in that, as the committee really started to get going in terms of, we've now got the Man City guys on board. We've got Michael Edwards on board. That age has really significantly come down at that point, ready to start buying those the next gen players. And Mo, anything from you on this era? I know you had plenty to say about Brendan at the time, but last words from you on the Brendan era. Shit show.
No, I think it shows that you can have as sound a strategy as you like, but if key personnel don't buy in, the whole thing can fall apart. And that's the biggest downfall that we had at that time. The transfer committee was almost joked about at that time, if you remember. Look at Liverpool Football Club. They've got one set of people trying to go in one direction. You've got the manager trying to go in another direction. The transfer committee's a joke. It doesn't work. Why are they persisting with it? And yet, for all intents and purposes, we still have a transfer committee, and it's proven to be the most successful recruitment approach, arguably, in world football over the last 5 years. So, it shows that when everyone buys in and moves in the same direction, that, you can achieve some wonderful things. So, it really shows, how, Brendan was a key blocker, despite at the time, some people being almost distraught that the club was moving him on. But, it proved to be completely the right decision in many, many respects.
It was a massive split, though, in the fan base, wasn't there, between committee and Brendan?
To be honest, I look back and I can't believe that there was such a big. It just shows you that the club, there are some fans that just want to blindly follow the person that's in, and that should never be the case. Never, ever be the case. If there wasn't half a fan base clamoring for this guy to go, because it was getting toxic. The fan base was getting toxic in the stands everywhere. It was getting really bad. And you could tell the manager was getting toxic with players, but people still wanted him in.
April 2015, Gags, your worst ever day as a Liverpool fan, wasn't it? The semi-final at Wembley?
Yes, the first time ever I'd been in a stadium where I'm sitting there and all I see is debris flying over my head, and that's drinks and food that people didn't drink the whole game because they probably were feeling sick at what they were watching, flew over my head onto the Wembley pitch. Yeah, I just couldn't believe, that this team would change formation a million times.
7 times in the match.
Yeah, I like to say a million because I like to overdo it. But the fact was there was no process. And we always talk, Darth, about repeatable process. And I always love what Mo just said there about buy-in. That's the key thing for any process to work, like he said. Yeah. Any repeatable process is buy-in is key. And that's what leads us on to the next era. There's
an old business saying, isn't there? You want everybody inside the tent. Well, not only do we not have somebody outside the tent, he was pissing inside the tent.
Yeah, exactly. And that was my point, was that I can't believe, when I look back at the fans that were saying, AI, you're so negative against him, you're going to ruin, the fan bases like you or fans like you is what ruins, this football club. And I was like, I'm sorry, that's nonsense. We want this to work.
Yeah.
And, I just want everybody to know that if there's a fan out there that's upset with the way things are run, whether they're FSG out or not, it doesn't really matter. They do love Liverpool. It's their way of thinking. Now, what you can't say about us here is that we're not trying to be smart about it. We're literally looking at everything, numbers, and as AI Pro evolved in 2017, as Klopp was coming in, so just at the start, you can see what the whole idea was of Pro. A stats show, a fatigue, a fatigue type. And look how things have become prominent now. A finance show. Everything that we've done with AI Pro has gone on to become very prominent in football or with Liverpool fans or what they talk about. Have you noticed that? Has anyone noticed that? But
I agree.
It's literally like there's a trailblaze thing. Now, who was the first to bring? I don't like to really pat my back or my own back or our own back as AI, but we brought stats in to the public domain first, and people piggybacked off the idea.
Yeah, you did. You actually, Gags, it was you. You did it with EPL Index.
Yes, I did it. Yeah. I did, and I will take that credit. I did it in 2011. The first person who would put in $5,000 of his own money in his pocket and said, "You know what? I'm going to create a website, and I'm going to literally open this up to the world." And John Henry himself subscribed.
Yeah.
Okay, in 2011. Wow. So this is, and then people saw it, got the idea, had more money than me. Obviously, there will be, because I was literally an IT contractor trying out a project for the first time. I didn't have any business acumen. I didn't have any idea of how to grow this thing or go get funding or whatever. And that's my downfall, but that's okay. Other people who scored all jumped off the back of that great score, created something far superior, far better. And no shame in admitting that. No shame. And
but you people. EPL Index predates all those things that you mentioned.
Yeah, absolutely.
The only other one that out there was StatZone. That was it.
No, StatZone came after as well.
Did it?
Yes. Oh. StatZone on app came afterwards. Came after EPL Index.
Yeah.
Again, another one. Now, I'm just saying that there can be fans upset about things, even though they're smart. That doesn't mean that they're negative or anti-thinking. They're just trying to be a bit smarter and think about things outside of the bubble of just blind faith. And I think at Anfield Index, with the whole host of us, what we try to do is what we're doing here, looking at how we process things, how it works, what's happened, what's the evidence of it, and that's why sometimes when a stupid thing comes up about Osama Dembele, like for the 1 millionth time in 5 years, he's linked to you, and people still go, "We're going to get Dembele," and you're like, "Are you dumb, man? Come on! What's the process? We don't pay no one $300,000. Like, literally took us to a year to agree with Mo. Like, it just doesn't make sense. So, if there's something you take from the pod, it's that be a bit smarter, try and understand how things are working in the club, and apply it to what news is thrown, not only out by the club, because literally the club will try and take you down another path, because they want people to think something else. So that's what you need to think and how you think. But let's move on to what Mo really
just before Mo does all the numbers for the Klopp era and stuff. I just wanted to say that there's a bit of again that handover period, if you like, between managers. I mean, it was the nadir, like you said, Gags. That 2015 season was the nadir for the committee versus Rodgers. I mean, he even says in the public domain now, thanks to the Daily Mail, a hatchet job, that the committee were allowed to buy Firmino on condition that Rodgers could buy Benteke. I mean, that is the level. And these are both £30 million players. It's just the level of waste is just astonishing. So we can never hope to fulfil our potential because we weren't maximising our resources ourselves. And then Klopp, there's rumours are that Klopp was on sabbatical, wasn't he, that summer because he just left Dortmund, so he wasn't prepared to take another job straight away. And then so we end up starting. So we end up starting the season with Brendan. Everybody thought, the world and his wife thought he was going to get sacked after Stoke.
Mate, there were people praying. Yeah. Well, I just want to say, I think we've gone a bit longer than I thought on Brendan and Kenny. Is there any chance we could do a part 2 separately? I'm not sure how we can, because this one's going to take another hour. Absolutely going to take an hour on Klopp. And
let's do a part 2. Why not?
Yeah, that's
fine with me.
I think we've done 48 minutes, and obviously, sorry guys, it's my dad's birthday today, so this is to the listeners, so I do need to head off, but I thought it was really interesting what we've got to, and plus, when you want to hear the Klopp stuff, because it is way more positive, but it's interesting, there's some interesting years in there where maybe we could have spent a little bit more, or could we have? And there's a lot of conversations we can have, and I think Mo will testify to some of those things, but we can really go through each and every season with the proper detail, Darth, because there's some really exceptional seasons here in terms of recruitment.
Yeah, this is the good stuff.
This is the good stuff, and I think we've done of the negative parts. And I'll arrange with you both when that is. I know Mo, you're off on holiday next week, and Darth, I think you might be busy as well. But so you might have to wait a week or so, but that might give us a chance to maybe do some more business, and for Liverpool to do more business, so we can update the numbers a bit more. But sorry to cut it short, guys, but really appreciate your time so far, Darth and Mo. I'll arrange another date for part 2. But and sorry to cut short for the listeners, but family matters do come in, and I do need to jump out the door here. But okay, thank you so much for this for appearing on this episode of Money Talks, Mo, on your own show, and Darth as well.
Thank you.
And my apologies for cutting it short, because I know we were supposed to do this at 8 and we've pulled it forward, so sorry about that. But yes, we will be back very, very soon. Hope you enjoyed it. Give us your feedback. If you want us to take any other angle, let us know. We'll do that for the Klopp era, but we'll remember some of these numbers and make sure we bring them up on the next show too. Thank you so much. Have a good evening, and we'll see you soon.
We hope you enjoyed listening to this Anfield Index show. Please be sure to subscribe to our channel so future podcasts find their way to your device automatically. There's nothing quite like fan engagement, and we'd love to know what you think of anything discussed on this show. The best way to get in touch is over on our free Discord community, where both podcasters and listeners debate the hottest LFC topics 24/7. Sign up free now at AnfieldIndex.com/Discord. You won't regret it. You can also follow us on Twitter at Anfield Index and find us on Facebook by searching for Anfield Index. Oh, and before you go, we'd love it if you could leave us a 5-star review on your favourite podcast app. It only takes a couple of seconds, and it means the world to the people who create these free shows.